Louisiana State Penitentiary, known as Angola Prison, is not just another maximum security facility. It is a place defined by permanence. For most of the men who enter its gates, Angola is not where a sentence is served, it is where life ends. Angola sits on more than 18,000 acres of land, isolated by geography and history. Surrounded on three sides by the Mississippi River, escape is nearly impossible. But physical isolation is not what truly defines this prison. What defines Angola is time, or more precisely, the absence of an end to it. The majority of inmates at Angola are serving life sentences. Many were sentenced under laws that offer no realistic chance of parole. For them, there is no countdown, no release date to circle on a calendar. There is only the understanding that they will grow old and die inside these walls. This reality shapes everything. From the moment an inmate arrives at Angola, the future changes. In most prisons, time moves towards something: a parole hearing, a transfer, release. At Angola, time stretches forward without resolution. Days blend into years. Years blend into decades. The concept of after prison disappears. For inmates serving life without parole, Angola becomes the final address. This has profound psychological consequences. Knowing that there is no possibility of release forces the mind to adapt in ways few outside the prison system can understand. Some inmates break down. Others withdraw. Many rebuild their sense of identity around the prison itself. Angola becomes their world. Unlike prisons where turnover is constant, Angola's population ages in place. Men arrive in their 20s or 30s and remain into old age. Wheelchairs become common. Chronic illness spreads. The prison slowly transforms into something resembling a lockdown nursing home. Yet these are not ordinary elderly residents. They are men convicted of serious crimes, many violent. The state has decided that their punishment is not temporary confinement, but permanent removal from society. This raises an uncomfortable truth. Angola is not designed for rehabilitation in the traditional sense. When release is impossible, rehabilitation takes on a different meaning. Programs focus on behavior management, spiritual reflection, and daily stability, not preparation for re-entry. For many inmates, the question is no longer who will I be when I leave? It becomes who will I be while I remain? Some inmates adapt by finding routine. Work assignments, religious services, education programs, and prison jobs provide structure. Others find meaning through relationships with fellow inmates, forming long-term bonds that replace family connections lost over time. But even adaptation has limits. Long-term incarceration without hope of release alters how time is experienced. Days feel heavy. Years feel indistinct. The future loses shape. Studies of lifers show higher rates of depression, emotional numbness, and resignation. Hope becomes something abstract, detached from reality. Inside Angola, this psychological landscape is visible everywhere. Cells are decorated not with plans for freedom, but with memories. Photographs fade. Letters stop coming. Family members age and pass away. The outside world continues without them. Technology advances. Culture shifts. The distance between life inside and outside grows wider every year. For inmates who entered Angola decades ago, the world they knew no longer exists. The prison administration acknowledges this permanence openly. Angola is often described as a prison for life. The nickname is not exaggeration. Roughly 3/4 of the inmate population is serving life sentences. Many will never stand before a parole board. This reality shapes how Angola operates. Security is strict, but not driven by constant transfers or preparation for release. The system is designed to manage long-term confinement. Violence, once rampant, has been reduced through stability rather than turnover. In a strange way, permanence creates order. When inmates know they are not leaving, incentives change. There is little benefit in causing chaos that will only make daily life harder for decades to come. Many inmates settle into acceptance. Angola becomes a place of routine rather than resistance. But acceptance is not peace. Behind the calm exterior lies the weight of finality. Every illness feels heavier when there is no future beyond the prison. Every conflict carries long-term consequences. Every loss is permanent. As inmates age, medical needs increase. Angola has responded by developing one of the largest prison hospice programs in the country. Inmates who are dying receive end-of-life care inside the prison. Fellow inmates are trained as hospice volunteers, caring for men who will take their final breath behind bars. This is one of the few places in America where death sentences are not required for inmates to die in custody. Life without parole accomplishes the same outcome over time. For some, hospice provides dignity in the final moments. For others, it is a reminder that the prison was never meant to be temporary. The existence of hospice at Angola highlights the core truth of the institution. Release is the exception, not the rule. Occasionally, an inmate is paroled after decades. These cases are rare and often make headlines precisely because they are unusual. When they happen, they expose another challenge: reintegration after a lifetime behind bars. Men released from Angola after 40 or 50 years often struggle to function in the outside world. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. Society has moved on without them. Freedom, when it comes, is disorienting. This reinforces the belief among those still inside that release is not something to plan for. So instead, inmates plan for survival. They learn how to exist within a system that offers no exit. They measure time not in years remaining, but in routines maintained. Some turn to religion, others to work, others simply endure. Angola becomes less a prison and more a permanent environment, a place where lives unfold entirely within confinement. This permanence is not accidental. It is the result of sentencing laws, political choices, and a justice system that prioritizes punishment over reintegration for certain crimes. Angola absorbs the outcome of those decisions. And once inside, the future narrows to a single certainty: the gates will not open. What it means to live under that certainty, how inmates adapt, resist, or surrender to it, is the deeper story of Angola. And it is far from over. Parole reality versus myth: aging inmates and mental health, how no release changes prison culture, and how Angola became a prison of permanence.
Soal cap building, until we reach your full 6K, 8K, without ending it early.
Will keep building until we reach your full 6K, 8K, without ending it early. As time passes inside Angola Prison, the idea of release becomes something many inmates stop talking about altogether. Not because it is forbidden, but because for most of them, it simply isn't realistic. Angola was never designed as a temporary holding space. It was built to contain people for life, and its population reflects that reality. A large percentage of inmates at Angola are serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Many were sentenced under harsh laws passed during periods when punishment, not rehabilitation, dominated the American justice system.
For this man, Angola is not a stop along the way. It is the final place they will ever live.
For these men, Angola is not a stop along the way. It is the final place they will ever live. Even for inmates who technically have parole eligibility, release is rare. Louisiana's parole system is among the strictest in the United States. Hearings are infrequent, standards are high, and approvals are uncommon. Inmates can spend decades maintaining clean records, working prison jobs, and completing programs, only to be denied parole repeatedly without clear explanations. Over time, hope becomes something dangerous. Many inmates learn to manage expectations by lowering them completely. Talking about the future feels pointless when the future never changes. Angola becomes not just a prison, but an entire world, one with its own routines, hierarchies, and sense of time. The physical size of Angola reinforces this reality. Spanning more than 18,000 acres, it is one of the largest maximum security prisons in the world. The Mississippi River wraps around it on 3 sides, isolating the facility geographically as well as psychologically. Escape is nearly impossible, not just because of security, but because of distance, terrain, and visibility. Angola operates as a self-contained society. Inmates farm crops, raise livestock, repair buildings, and maintain roads. The prison produces much of what it consumes. This structure reduces costs, but it also keeps inmates anchored to the institution. Work becomes routine. Routine becomes identity. For many inmates, their job inside Angola is the most consistent structure they have ever known. Some work in the fields under the open sky, performing labor that resembles the prison's past as a former plantation. Others work in workshops, kitchens, or maintenance crews. These roles provide purpose, but they also reinforce permanence. The prison does not prepare inmates for re-entry into society. It prepares them to function inside Angola. Education programs exist, but access is limited, and participation does not guarantee release. Angola does not operate on the assumption that inmates will return to the outside world. Instead, it focuses on managing long-term confinement. Classes, religious services, and work programs are designed to maintain order, not to create exit pathways. Aging is another reason most inmates will never leave. Angola has one of the largest populations of elderly prisoners in the United States. Men sentenced in their 20s or 30s grow old behind bars. Medical needs increase. Mobility decreases. Over time, the prison becomes not just a correctional facility, but a long-term care environment. As inmates age, parole becomes even less likely. Boards are reluctant to release elderly prisoners with serious medical conditions, especially those serving life sentences for violent crimes. The logic is rooted in risk aversion rather than rehabilitation. It is safer, administratively, to let inmates die inside the system than to release them. This reality shapes inmate behavior in subtle but profound ways. When release is no longer an option, survival becomes the primary goal. Long-term inmates focus on stability rather than resistance. Violence decreases among those who accept permanence, while younger inmates often struggle more with frustration and anger. The prison's internal culture reflects this divide. Veteran inmates often act as informal stabilizers, discouraging reckless behavior that could trigger lockdowns or restrictions. They understand that disruption only makes life harder for everyone. Angola's relative calm in modern times is not accidental. It is the result of a population that has learned to live with finality. However, this calm should not be mistaken for freedom or comfort. Angola remains a maximum security prison, and control is always present. Movement is regulated. Surveillance is constant. Rules are enforced strictly. The absence of chaos does not mean the absence of punishment. It means punishment has become normalized. Religion plays a significant role in how inmates cope with the reality of never leaving. Angola is home to one of the largest prison seminary programs in the country. Faith offers meaning where the legal system offers none. For some inmates, spirituality becomes a way to reclaim identity and dignity within confinement. Yet even faith does not change the fundamental truth. Angola is where people stay. The institution does not revolve around release schedules or reintegration planning. It revolves around long-term management. Everything, from housing assignments to work placements, is built around the assumption that inmates will remain indefinitely. This permanence affects relationships with the outside world. Families age alongside inmates. Parents die. Children grow up without them. Over time, visits become less frequent. Phone calls slow. Letters stop arriving. The prison becomes the primary, and sometimes only, remaining connection. For inmates who entered Angola young, the outside world becomes unfamiliar. Technology advances. Cultural references change. Society moves forward without them. Even if release were possible after decades, reintegration would be overwhelming. For many, the outside world becomes abstract, something remembered, not experienced. Angola's disciplinary system further reinforces permanence. Infractions can result in loss of privileges, job assignments, or housing changes. For inmates serving life sentences, these consequences matter more than parole prospects. Comfort, routine, and relative stability become the currency of survival. The death penalty also plays a role in Angola's identity. For decades, Angola housed Louisiana's death row. While executions have declined, the presence of condemned inmates reinforced the prison's reputation as a place where sentences end in death rather than release. Even among non-death row inmates, the symbolism remains powerful. Over time, Angola has become less about punishment as spectacle and more about punishment as endurance. There are no dramatic escapes, no mass uprisings, and no illusions of freedom. The prison does not need to remind inmates of its authority. Time does that. For most inmates, the realization comes quietly. Not in courtrooms or parole hearings, but during ordinary days, while working fields, eating meals, or lying in their bunks at night. The understanding settles in gradually. This is where life will end. Angola does not promise redemption or transformation. It promises containment. It is a prison designed not to release people, but to absorb them into its structure permanently. And for the majority of inmates inside its gates, that reality never changes. As years turn into decades inside Angola Prison, permanence becomes more than a legal status. It becomes a psychological condition. Inmates do not simply serve time, they learn to exist within time that no longer moves toward anything. The calendar loses meaning. Birthdays pass without celebration. Holidays become markers of absence rather than joy. For many inmates, the first years are the hardest. That is when hope still exists. Men file appeals, wait for parole eligibility, and imagine futures that may never come. But as years pass without change, hope slowly erodes. The repeated denial of parole hearings, the absence of legal progress, and the reality of aging inside a closed system reshape expectations. Eventually, many inmates stop asking when they will leave. They begin asking how to live with where they are. This shift marks a critical psychological transition. Inmates who accept that they will never leave often become more compliant, more routine-driven, and less outwardly confrontational. This is not surrender, it is adaptation. Resistance offers no reward when the endpoint never changes. Angola's administration has long understood this dynamic. The prison operates on stability rather than constant enforcement. Inmates who follow rules are granted small privileges, preferred work assignments, access to programs, limited movement. These incentives matter deeply in a place where nothing else changes. In this environment, routine becomes survival. Wake-up times, work details, meals, and lights out define existence. Days repeat with little variation. Over time, this repetition dulls emotional extremes. Anger softens into resignation. Excitement fades into caution. Emotional numbness becomes common. Psychologists describe this as institutionalization, a state where inmates become psychologically dependent on the structure of prison life. At Angola, institutionalization is not an unintended side effect. It is the natural outcome of a system built for permanent confinement. This has consequences for mental health. Long-term inmates face high rates of depression, anxiety, and emotional withdrawal. Some experience memory issues. Others lose the ability to imagine life outside prison walls. Conversations revolve around the present or the past, rarely the future. The absence of future planning changes how inmates see themselves. Identity becomes rooted in roles inside the prison: worker, mentor, religious leader, caretaker. These roles provide meaning, but they are confined to Angola. There is no version of these identities that exists beyond the gates. For inmates who entered Angola young, adulthood unfolds entirely within prison. They learn to shave, work, argue, forgive, and age behind bars. Life milestones occur internally. Promotions happen within work crews. Friendships form and dissolve. Death becomes familiar. Angola's aging population highlights another reason most inmates will never leave: medical decline. As inmates age, chronic illnesses become widespread. Diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, and mobility issues increase. The prison's medical facilities expand to manage long-term care. Wheelchairs and walkers become common sights in housing units. Once an inmate reaches advanced age or severe illness, parole becomes even less likely. Release is often viewed as a liability rather than an opportunity. The system prioritizes containment over compassion. It is administratively simpler to provide end-of-life care inside prison than to manage re-entry for elderly inmates with limited support. This reality has led Angola to develop one of the largest prison hospice programs in the country. Inmates nearing death are moved into hospice units where fellow inmates, trained as volunteers, provide care. These volunteers feed, bathe, and sit with dying men who will never leave the institution alive. Hospice care at Angola is often described as humane, even compassionate. And in many ways, it is. But it also underscores the prison's purpose. Angola is not a place people leave. It is a place where life sentences are completed through death. For inmates witnessing hospice care, the message is unmistakable. This is the end of the road. Yet even in this environment, life continues. Men form friendships that last decades. Some mentor younger inmates. Others take pride in maintaining order and calm within their housing units. In the absence of hope for release, dignity becomes internal rather than external. Religion, again, plays a central role. Angola's seminary program allows inmates to become ministers, providing spiritual guidance to others. Faith offers a framework for meaning beyond the justice system. It allows inmates to reinterpret their lives not in terms of punishment, but purpose. However, faith does not change sentencing laws. Louisiana's legal structure ensures that life sentences remain just that, life. Appeals are limited. Clemency is rare. Political pressure discourages parole for violent offenders. Public opinion often equates release with risk, regardless of age or behavior. As a result, Angola absorbs generations of inmates without releasing them. This permanence also affects how staff operate. Guards and administrators know that many inmates will be present for decades. Relationships, while professional, become long-term. Officers watch inmates age. Some attend funerals of inmates they have known for years. The prison becomes a closed community where time moves differently for everyone involved. Despite reforms and improvements, Angola's core function remains unchanged. It is designed to hold people indefinitely. The reduction in violence over recent decades is often cited as evidence of success. But that stability comes at the cost of finality. There are no illusions of rehabilitation through release. Rehabilitation at Angola means learning to live peacefully within confinement, not preparing for freedom. This reality challenges traditional ideas about justice. If punishment has no endpoint, what is its purpose? Deterrence? Incapacitation? Moral condemnation? Angola embodies the answer through practice rather than theory. It removes people permanently. For some inmates, this removal feels deserved. For others, it feels disproportionate. But inside Angola, those debates carry little practical meaning. The sentence has already been decided. The future has already been narrowed. The prison does not ask inmates to imagine life beyond its walls. It asks them to endure life within them. And as years pass, endurance becomes identity. Angola is not loud in its punishment. It is quiet. It does not rely on constant force or spectacle. It relies on time, slow, unchanging, and absolute. For most inmates, the realization arrives not through violence or conflict, but through ordinary moments, watching younger inmates arrive and age, attending funerals inside the prison, or realizing that no one on the outside remembers them anymore. That is when permanence becomes undeniable. And once it does, leaving is no longer a question. Angola Prison is not defined by its walls, its fences, or even its size. It is defined by time. For most of the men inside, the sentence was never meant to end. There is no release date waiting in the distance, no moment when the gates open and life begins again. Angola is where time slows, stretches, and eventually runs out. Years pass quietly. Faces age. Names disappear from call lists. The outside world moves forward while life inside remains fixed in place. What begins as punishment becomes permanence. Some inmates adapt. Others endure. A few find meaning where they can. But all share the same understanding. This is where their story will end. Angola does not promise redemption through freedom. It offers survival within confinement, order instead of chaos, stability instead of hope. Whether that is justice or something else entirely depends on how punishment is defined. Because at Angola, the sentence is not measured in years. It is measured in a lifetime.